I'll get your name tag.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this session of the Warrant Committee. You all have received the agenda. You received the minutes of the last meeting electronically. Are there any changes to the minutes?
No.
If not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have certain articles that have been sent around. They have not yet been validated by the town council, the board of the select board. And so we do have a draft of the Kidder Library warrant for which I believe is going to come up at the special town meeting in February. So we have John Focarelli, who's chair of the library trustees, and Bill. And then Bill, please pronounce your last name for me. I don't want to Adamczyk, just the way it should be. Please come and join us, and we're interested to hear what you have to say. I don't have a number for this particular warrant because they have not been assigned yet by the chair of the select board. So if you all have that, and you can either pull it up, or if you want to read it to us before you begin, that's fine too. But we're here and very interested to hear how this has been evolving.
So the article itself would be the exact same wording as the article that we presented at the last town meeting. I have print copies I could pass around if...
That always helps.
Okay. Go this way. And that's what we submitted to the select board again last month and discussed with them last month. Did people receive copies of the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Everybody got it.
Thank you. Do you have yours?
Can I see
Yeah, I
this
do.
one right now?
Yeah. These are extras.
I'm not going
Okay.
to go through it word for word, but I just want to kind of bring us up to speed on where we are and where we've been with the Kidder update, and then John will also add some color to it for us as well. But we have a little bit of a background, some of the usage of the building, the communication and the process we've taken over the last three and a half plus years, and then some of the conclusions and vision that came as a result of that. So the Kidder property was deeded to the inhabitants of the town of Milton back in 1928 to be held in trust by the library trustees. I think we all know it's located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway, and it's zoned residential, Section 3 A and B, so residential or educational purposes. We're not looking at changing that as part of this process. The next slide kind of just shows a graphic of how the building has been used since the inception in the 20s. The longest period of time was clearly as a branch of the library. Then it was shared over the years by KEDS from the school and the COA. It was used temporarily for the library, again, when we were renovating the main library. And since 2009, it's been used, leased out to the Discovery Schoolhouse. Communication process started back in February of 2015 when we communicated to the Discovery Schoolhouse, the current tenants, that we being the trustees, were looking into developing a vision for that property. Mm-hmm. The process was creating timelines and communication schedules, beginning to engage town committees and groups at that time. Since February 15, we've held numerous meetings with town departments, the select board, planning board, park department, town planner, historical commission, and others. We've appeared in front of you, obviously, as well. As part of the process, we tried to work with the planning board, and we talked to different members of the planning board throughout the process. We've held open houses at the Kidder building. We held general forum open houses, and then we also held smaller open houses with interested parties from school department to affordable housing, different people who contacted us over the months. There's a list in there of the different groups that we've engaged with, from discussions on the Teen Center to Milton Food Pantry, Community Baptist Church. So it's both town departments have looked at it and community groups have looked at this. In addition, we've held 5 open public forums. Most recent one was 1 or 2 Mondays ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head right now. We've worked with local realtors for market analysis on the property. We had a formal appraisal done, which was done, I think, back in February or March. All in order to research estimates for what the property would be worth. In order to look at what the cost would be to renovate it for any other use by the town or the library, we would need to work with an engineer and an architecture firm, which would cost more money, and it's not the vision of the library at this time, so we have not gotten involved with either an architect or an engineer. We have early estimates from Bill Ritchie, but to get into the nitty-gritty, we would really need to hire outside help for that. Getting to the conclusions, the use of the property currently and in the foreseeable future doesn't further the mission of the library. The property is a financial and resource drain on the town. It doesn't raise as much money as it often costs. A lot of the cost is kind of hidden cost because it's the cost of the Consolidated Facilities Department, the DPW, and the library. There's a lot of staff time involved, especially for Bill Ritchie and his crew, to do many of the repairs. The financial costs are when we have to have outside parties do some of the repairs, if it's the roof, if it's fencing, paving, things like that. Property does not fit the needs of any town departments. We've met with the select board, and the town administrator concurred with this. We've met with, and they're listed, many different town departments. The trustees and myself would like to remain focused on supporting the main library, which is currently understaffed. So there is no foreseeable future of having a branch library. We moved from branch library system about 10 years ago to the centralized library. So wrapping up, if I can, the strategic vision that the Board of Trustees came to was to eliminate the impact, was to sell the building, which would eliminate the impact on resources and finances, refocus the trustees from oversight and property management to its long-range plan and mission, to use the funds from the sale of the property to further the library's long-range plan and mission again, or make needed improvements on the main library building. The school, Discovery Schoolhouse, has been notified of this plan. They currently have a lease extension that goes through the end of August 2019, which was part of our timeline. So our next steps were to work with town council to draft an RFP for the property, to gain town meeting approval for the trustees to sell the property, finalize the RFP to solicit buyers, and then the trustees would have a committee selected to help select the buyer of the property. There's an appendix I won't go into at the end that kind of highlights some of the costs of the building on an annual basis. So that's a history of where we've been. It's been about a 3.5-year process since the trustees started the discussion. They've had the discussion on and off for a number of years, but about 3.5 years ago it became a discussion in earnest. The property hasn't served the mission of the library for many years. And in the foreseeable future, when we have a centralized library system, it will not be used as a branch anytime soon. And we worked with all the town departments. Again, the schools looked at it for a kindergarten program, and that wasn't feasible. The teen center wasn't a feasible location. So we've knocked on a lot of doors and invited a lot of people into the building to see what other possibilities there were. I don't know if you want to add anything, John?
No, I mean, the last, I think it was the 19th of November, we had an open meeting and no one came. So on the forum, and we've had, fairly low attendance before. I mean, we heard and we had discussions after we came in August, and that no one likes to let these properties go. It's sort of difficult to get them back, but we're in a terrible bind here, and we've exhaustively looked at other places, talked to everybody in the town, the school committee, Milton Hospital, all the people that Will has spoken to, and so far, we've got no interest, and right now, we're just holding this in perpetuity for no apparent reason. And it's definitely a burden on it. We're subsidizing a private preschool, which seems to, do a decent job, but that's, I don't think, our role and we don't see, a way out without selling the building. Anybody the preschool has shown some interest, they sublet to a church that is in there on the weekends that has also expressed interest. Those would be great. There's a lot of things. When we went to the select board, Chairman Richard Wells talked about affordable housing. All of these things would be great, but until, right now, we're just landlords to this preschool, and we're not getting enough to maintain the building at a proper level to go forward, to make it more attractive for someone else, and for us to upgrade it for an unknown purpose that's not related to the library just seems to be not a proper use of the town's funds. So that's why we've come before you again. We heard what you said. We went out again and talked to everybody about how we could save this property from sale, but so far we haven't got we've got nobody in town that wants to take it for any of the purposes that, we all know that we need new fire stations, the school needs space, so we've approached all of these people and no one.
And the school department had no interest in even to renovate it
They
for
just said-
office space,
No,
Did they spend any
remote or
time
too expensive.
discussing it?
yeah, no, well, I don't know about in their sessions, but they went to the, they went to it, went to the
But they,
No, but I would think office space
property,
is not
looked at it, et
subdivision.
cetera, but,
Yeah.
again, just in terms of, what they need, they just said they just didn't have any need for it. I
Yeah.
don't know whether.
They said it was too small a space for what they were looking for
4,000 square feet?
For offices.
the schools, yeah.
Well, I would assume that the schools were looking to put a class in there, or multiple classes, instead of going what you said, Mr. Chairman, which is office space. Did they ask you about office space?
We just showed them the property, they didn't ask us, they discussed among themselves the specific
Ah.
uses, but not with us.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Even if there was interest by the schools, you'd still be in the same position? it sounds
Correct.
That's right,
like. You'd still have to
They have to
transfer.
sell
that's
it.
right, that's right,
Right.
They
So it would
can't
have to be an
transfer it,
outright
they have to
sale.
sell it.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Is there,
Well, it could be a lease.
Could be, but,
We're all one town, trying to work
Yeah,
together
yeah,
as a town.
understood.
yeah, is
Understood.
there a way to?
And there is a huge
perhaps-
need. The schools came to us,
Yeah.
wanted to form a building
Yeah.
committee, which we can't afford to do either.
right.
Right.
Is there a way to, in effect, abide by the terms of the will where you have to sell it? You can't just give it, you can't transfer it to another town department. I think you
No,
have
I
to
mean,
sell
I-
it, correct?
Yes.
I wonder if there's a way where you could sell it to like the Board of Selectmen or the schools if they want it,
Yeah,
but with some
I
sort
mean,
of
we're
annuities
certainly
or
open to
something.
that, but nobody's stepped forward to say that they
Right,
want,
to ask them.
that's,
So assuming that the sale has to go through, or it seems like that is the most logical thing. The issue, I think, is what are the use of proceeds and how are they going to be channeled to Nathaniel Kidder's intent? So talk to us a little about that, if there's anything that has been proposed internally that you can share with us, even on a preliminary basis, because, when you get a gift like this to the town, these are not growing on trees. I can't think of the last one that was made to the town, certainly none in my lifetime.
yeah, no, I think we understand that.
And
but,
I appreciate that you do.
that-
And so the question is, you get the cash, what are you going to do? Or
Well-
what would you like to do?
Well, I think that we would look at, one of the biggest issues is parking at the library. That's a very difficult issue that affects town and traffic, et cetera, and that, would be sufficient money to look at that realistically and, what we could do. And we've had the town engineer and we've looked at the property behind the library, which is the libraries, but it abuts wetland that, so, I mean, but we're looking at, all of these things, and we think, I mean, that's one of the, the uses, and just the, physical plant itself, there's a lot of things that I think we could do to that itself with the funds, but, certainly, that would be our intention, is to put that
Into the physical plant.
back into the physical building, because that certainly would be in concert with.
The intent of the gift.
With Kidder's
Original
intent.
gift, right,
Yeah.
90 some odd years ago.
And then another smaller piece of it that's been discussed is, as we've come before this committee over the past couple of years, the library has a revolving fund for library fines, and that has been trending down at a quicker clip year over year. So part of these proceeds, if some would be for the building, and if there's a smaller set aside to help make up that difference that we're seeing on an annual basis between what we need to meet state requirements and what we're losing out of this revolving fund. So it could be a combination of both materials and physical plant.
And the revolving fund is just essentially operating expenses.
So the revolving fund funds right back into the book budget. So our book budget is divided between what is funded in the operating budget and a section that is funded from this revolving fund. And due to the increased use of ebooks and digital formats, which we can't collect fines on, we've seen a decrease in the fine revenue from a peak of probably 60 to 65,000, and last year was closer to 50,000.
So the decline is because of the ebooks, or because people are returning their books on time, or because
I'm not returning my books on time.
I'm pretty sure I have an outstanding.
Yeah,
bill,
no,
too,
yeah,
so-
no. It's predominantly due to ebook usage.
It is. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? That, if I understood the document, the monthly rent is, that the schoolhouse is paying is less than $1,800?
It's right around there, yeah.
How did you come to that figure? It seems very low to me for 4,000 square feet.
That's right. So I was not here when the original negotiations took place.
When the original negotiations took place,
Search
I was.
Please come and identify yourself
Hyacinth.
and tell us your role.
Hyacinth Critchlow,
Library trustee.
library trustee. When the original rent of the property came down, actually, and I hate to say this, but it was more to help the school.
Oh.
And most of the people there were friends at the time, and we thought, why not help someone out, because they really needed it. They didn't have any money. They were coming from a place over by Brush Hill Road that was closed down, and they desperately needed a place. At the time, they didn't have the money. So we, as trustee, some of the members had children going to the school at the time, and thought that why not, rent it at a price that they could afford at the time. And so it stayed that way. They didn't really try to go any higher than what was asked of them at the time. And so that's why it was so low. It wasn't as if that it was deliberate. It was a point where we were trying to help someone that was really in need.
I will just raise this point. The conflict of interest there is
Yeah.
smack across the face.
Very
If the
much so.
trustees were benefiting as a result of this is a problem. I have a problem with it, honestly.
Well, that was what
That's
happened.
But over the years, there was no reason to increase it? I mean, I'm
Yeah, we
not,
tried, we did, we increased it
I mean,
over
you
the
can
years.
increase it, and if they can't pay it, see you later, Charlie. I mean, I hate to be
Well,
that
it is.
blunt
So
about
you're
it,
paying
but the job
45
of
cents
the
a square
trustees
foot?
is to care for the library, not necessarily this not-for-profit, lovely as it might be, and I have run not-for-profits, but, our responsibility is to the town. I'm sorry to bring that up, but it just,
Is there not
little
an entity
egregious.
in the town that property manages these things?
No.
Because I understand that the library doesn't want to be in this business.
of course.
But it's still illogical. I mean, you could run this not at a deficit. One could.
Well,
Is that true?
how many people here have seen the space?
I have.
I have.
It's,
I
it's,
mean,
I have.
it's in very bad.
Yeah, I know it's not in great shape.
yeah, I mean,
very
it's-
attractive.
you know, You're not gonna get somebody to come in there to pay, you know.
A lot of
But
money
I just
for
wanna,
it.
I
You're
just,
not
for
going
the
to.
record, wanna say, the childcare center that's there right now is paying 45 cents a square foot. Is that right? Am I doing that math right? I mean, that's,
Well, I'm not sure about the math, but if I can just give a little bit more background. So I was going to say, I was not here when the original negotiations took place, but it's my understanding from talking to the previous library director that there were 3 rounds of, not I guess it was RFPs, at higher prices that no one responded to.
Right,
And what happened was there was a 3rd round with a lower,
right.
nobody wanted it for the higher price.
For the higher price.
And the
It was
Discovery
back.
Schoolhouse was the only bidder.
When was their last?
And they have had an annual increase, percentage increase ranging from 1% to 3% year over year, every year
When
since.
was their last
matching
lease
inflation.
up? When was their last lease?
Their
renewal?
last lease expired last month, and we extended it until August of next year.
Did you ask to see if there was anybody else, just to see, go through the process, if there was anybody else willing to?
This time, we
Take
just
over
did a
the
lease
leases.
extension because we were hoping to sell the
just-
property within 8 months.
So you don't know if there's anybody currently who might be?
No,
You just don't?
it's in pretty bad shape.
Oh, I know it is.
The
I'm just-
building is
I'm
in
just-
very, very bad shape. It was in bad
Yes,
shape
I
back then,
understand.
all
I
those
just-
years.
I-
And we did
Process.
repairs to it, but it was really, really in bad state. No one wanted it. And this man wanted it, so we said, why not give it to him at that
I
price?
mean, it sounds like there was an open process. just
Yeah.
to get-
Otherwise it
Any
would've-
Conflict of interest that anybody did anything. I wasn't
And
there.
I understand, I
Yeah,
understand,
but
and it's all in the past, there's nothing to be done now,
But
but
yes.
wow.
On
Okay.
that point, can I just ask a couple questions? So I understand you didn't specifically make a request to see if anybody else would prefer to be the tenant. However, I mean, am I understanding, there are a couple, there's a nest of questions, not too many.
Go ahead, please.
Am I understanding correctly that the process that you went through in talking to stakeholders in the town, which sounded like many, I think gave you, am I right, the sense that there wouldn't necessarily be any other takers to be tenants?
So the process was, we spoke, well, we asked anybody to respond that they could, and then we reached out to individual departments, groups, committees, and none of those committees replied, whether they saw it or not, that they had any interest in it.
And am I right that the only way that it makes sense for the library trustees to be maintaining this property not as a library, but as a landlord for some other purpose, is if you're making enough money that you can then plow the extra money that you get from the tenant into the library itself? That's the only way that it would make sense, I think, from the
That's
trustee's
right.
perspective.
That's right.
Okay. And it's your sense that, absent that, there's actually, it's quite the opposite. It's actually a drain on, it's doing the opposite of what it was intended to do for the library.
That's right, at this point, because when it was a library branch, it served its role.
Right.
But, I mean, I would challenge even further of whether, if it was a break even for the library, would it still be a deal, property that you want to hold, or is the intent, really, we'd like to get out from under being a landlord
Yeah, I was gonna-
and sell it and do something else with the funds?
Yeah, no, I was gonna make that point to what you're saying. I mean, even if we were making money off this property, we'd still be, I mean, Will, who's the, paid as director of the library, is spending time being a property manager.
Yeah, no, I get that.
It just doesn't make, it's not rational. Even if we were making a little, the idea that we'd make a windfall is
Yeah, well,
just, not in the cards, but even if we were making a little money, it's not worth all the time and effort. I mean, we'd just be seeing revenue, but you wouldn't see the time that Bill Ritchie spends over there.
Right.
His crew, the time that Will spends, those kinds of things are just, I don't think the appropriate use of the library's resources or the town's resources. I mean, it's not a pretty, definitely admit, this is not something we'd like to do. I mean, I'd like to keep the assets of the town intact as long as possible, but we just don't have a reasonable alternative here.
And the schools didn't want it.
I mean,
The school committee, I know it needs work. I've actually been inside the building, and I think it's beautiful from the outside, and then when you get inside, you see all the cracks, right? That's what everything old here is. But I'm still flummoxed at the fact that the school committee really went there, and then they discussed amongst themselves, and they came back and said no. Because
I mean, can't answer for the school.
No, that's,
we would have to ask the school committee, wouldn't
they're
we?
gonna come in next Monday, so we'll have the chance to do that.
Okay, great.
I'm sure they'll be looking forward to that conversation. However, I think, if it's almost a given that your sense, the best use of the property is to dispose of it for all the reasons that we discussed, and that you brought up, all of which I think are legitimate.
Yes.
The question remains, the use of proceeds, from my perspective, the use of proceeds, I mean, plowing it into a parking lot doesn't sit right with me for whatever reason. I mean, it really doesn't. And I understand the wetlands issue, and I understand them very well, having dealt with that for other properties. And, you know, God forbid you find a salamander there or something that's endangered, and then unclean, you can't do anything. What is the other alternative, and should this money not be put into trust, and the income from it disposed to the library?
You know, I mean, that's definitely something that we would consider. I mean, that's,
That was the thought behind the book budget part of it, part of it would be the trust, and it would be kicking off the proceeds for something like that.
That sort of thing, I think, has more resonance with
Right.
me. I mean, I can't speak for the committee.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To George's point. So I'm looking at the language of the Warrant article, upon such terms as the trustees of the public library deem appropriate. Is there, and pardon my ignorance in asking this question, is there some sort of governing document over what binds the discretion of the trustees on this point? Or is it unlimited, you can just
It's
decide?
unlimited. I believe it's unlimited.
So they could use it, let me understand that correctly. So even if we had recommended that they use it for something else, they could in turn use it for a parking lot. Am I correct in that understanding?
Or to buy a bunch of cars?
Or,
That's what
right.
this is, exactly.
Or to go back to the
Well,
Dewey
we
Decimal
don't
System.
think that they're gonna go to
We
funds.
still use that.
Okay.
Kevin, you had a question? Yeah.
I was just going to ask, in the same line as George and Chris's question, it's about the use of the funds once the property is sold. And you mentioned some one-time kind of operating expenses to cover the library car deficit. And maybe, I think you mentioned in the presentation, staff as well. Was that a potential? I mean,
I
that,
don't think that would be, because we don't want to use those
No.
as
Yeah.
operating.
Well,
Well,
That's
let
the
me
purpose.
just say that,
Yeah.
that the trustees are elected officials. We are going to do, in what we think is the best interest of the town, whether it's to put it in trust, to, parking lot, et cetera. We've had such a hard time getting to this stage to sell it, we haven't really thought about what we're
What
gonna do
to
with
use
the
it
money.
for.
Jonathan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, more of a statement. If you believe that this is a cash drain, the answer to the use of proceeds is not this.
Right.
Anything but
Right.
this. What if it's a parking lot? Like, just not this. This is I believe these guys. It sounds like cash drain.
Oh, you can see it.
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
but
was
you
just-
got library trustees, I mean, they're elected officials, you kind of have to put a little bit of faith in them.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, wait,
Well,
I think we're
one at a
dreaming up,
time.
I mean, I think we're fighting here a battle, which is, we're wanting something to be that just isn't.
No, I understand.
If nobody wants it, we're not gonna buy it.
Understood.
Well,
That's why we're moving on to talk about what you're gonna do with the cash.
Yeah, maybe
Doug, you
to
have a
help
question.
assuage our consciousness or something, I would reiterate that I would be a little concerned with trying to use the proceeds for operational expenses because it's a finite amount.
I would
It's not
definitely
gonna-
fight that.
But,
Yeah.
but also, to try and flesh out what might be happening in terms of the one idea we've been talking about is parking. That area is very limited. Would you be proposing using the proceeds to say buying an adjacent property? Say the one across the street or that yellow building in behind it that was
That's
for
a
sale a
house.
few years ago? Yeah,
That
so
was
it's a
moved.
dental, yeah, but something like that to make.
Those have been part of
additional parking
conversations.
zones.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that could be the idea of using all this capital to say buy a purchase land, because that,
Right.
the empty space is all wetlands, you can't do anything with it.
Tom?
No, right, and we've been working with Bill Clark on our discussions about what properties are town properties, what are potential properties around on Canton
Tom?
Ave.
Just what we've been talking about, potentially setting up a permanent fund. It's only $1.2 million.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be enough. You would not raise, in today's interest rates and with the restrictions of investing, government funds, you would not make enough money to
You'd get
even
about
spit at it.
$30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that, 35 maybe.
Right. Not worth it.
It wouldn't generate enough to do
No.
some of the things that you're talking about, so.
In
Unless you're losing
perpetuity.
$35,000 a year in book.
Right, but see, that's about the right kind of number for the books.
But you'd have to use the whole $1.2 million.
You have to use the whole trust.
And
just
assume that
for-
you're gonna get the 1.2 million for it, even, because that's what the assessment is, and who knows what the
Right.
price will ultimately
Absolutely.
be.
And that mostly so that you can keep up to the record numbers so that you get the state
That's right.
certification reimbursements or whatever. So you
Just
need to do that. anyway.
Right.
They have to purchase a certain amount of books and supplies and things in order
To get
state
state
standards.
state
All
money.
libraries have to
And that's where
maintain.
the issue of the revolving fund, because we used to get the revolving fund decreasing because people aren't paying as many fines as
Right.
they used to, which was
Right.
the source that we used regularly for that. So,
On the parking thing, I'm just curious, has anybody talked about adding a couple levels? Going up instead of going out?
I don't think we really looked at that.
We've discussed it, but not with any engineers.
Everybody
Yeah.
laughs at that, but in the
No.
city.
No, and that's what happens in
Yeah,
that.
there's no more space.
When there's no
Go
more
up.
space, you go up.
Yeah,
Right.
we thought, yeah,
Right.
we talked about.
Oh, there's
it.
wetlands,
It's all
so I
fill.
said go up.
Yeah, you go down and you're gonna, yeah.
Okay,
we
so
all-
that has
We all
not
have
been-
water in our basements at
I
some
mean,
point.
again, you know, we've been having conversations about parking, not really anticipating this, you know, a direct one, you know, that this is gonna be that. But the parking is always an issue with the trustees, because it's a problem, because it's a,
very
first
limited.
thing, you know, we do
Right.
surveys, et cetera,
No
that's the
land.
first complaint that people have, so.
I just have to say, in my years of living here, I've never had an issue parking there. I know, I'm gonna knock on wood now, but I've never had an issue.
You must go
Parking
at
there.
like.
I go with my kids. I'm
library's
telling you, I go with
closed?
my
'Cause
kids.
that's the
No,
only
I've
time.
never had an issue. I'm just telling you guys.
Well, there's a
I know.
satisfied customer.
Knocked on wood.
Yeah, you'll like it better when the
Now
library's
tomorrow.
open, so.
Stop it.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or any comments to share with our friends from the library?
Just one question, is this gonna be a February town meeting article, or?
It's been submitted
This is included in,
Right.
will be included in the list when the select board validates it and certifies it and sends it to us, which I think is happening next week. I hope it happens quickly. Thank you very much for coming.
Right. What do we need to do next?
What are the
I think
steps?
you've done just about everything you can tell us that you're
Right.
able to do at this point. You have, it seems like you've exhausted the town
So,
alternatives.
so you're waiting to hear from the select board?
They have to send us, they have to certify the
Give us an
warrant,
article.
the articles, and send it to us, and then we can review it. If this is the wording that we get, then you've done everything you can do at this point. I think the sense of the committee is that we understand the problem. I think we do understand the problem. It's clearly a situation where you've got an asset that has some value, but not initially what it was intended to bring to the town, that the cost of maintaining that is way over what it's earning or what it's even returning to the town, as it turns out. And then the question that we, I think, have been barraging you with is the use of proceeds, and to ensure that that use of proceeds is going to be along the intent of what Nathaniel Kidder had when he made this gift in the 1920s. And I think that's really the sense of what we would say to the town meeting at this time, is that in your fiduciary interest as elected representatives in charge of the trustee, in charge of the library as trustees, to ensure that the funds that are going to be generated from this sale will be commensurate with the intent of the gift. And that's in your interest, obviously, to do as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
I would just ask that if you have any questions before you take a vote on this, that we invite us back, just so that.
We certainly will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. Okay. The remainder of the warrant articles are all preliminary. I'm not quite sure what the value of discussing them at this point is until we have some sense from the select board of what is coming. What I can say is that I have heard from the school committee. I have asked them to have their budget's going to be ready, I think, tomorrow, and I've asked them to distribute it to us as quickly as possible. And they're coming in next Monday night. They'll be probably the major thing, if not the only thing on the agenda, because I don't even know if we'll have the warrant articles yet to look at, which I assume will come, I think the 12th of December is the day. It's going to be very tight. I'm understanding that a number of the articles are, quote, housekeeping articles. I'm not quite sure what that means these days, because even housekeeping articles can tie us up in knots. But I think that after a fashion, there'll probably be at least 5 or 6 that we're going to have to look at with some level of acuity to get this done, as we have with the library. But at least for our purposes, next Monday evening's meeting will focus largely on the schools. And if there are other articles that will percolate up to us that are prepared, then we can do it. I don't like using your time if these articles are not in final form, because it just, it's ridiculous, because if they change the language, it could change the whole sense of it, and we could be looking at many iterations of what could be very simple. The school committee has proposed, or at least they sent around to us, a draft of a potential article to start a building committee, and there is actually a format that has to be done for that. There has the format that has to be followed for that to happen, and I don't know if that's going to be included in the warrant that we get from the school, from the select board. So we'll see when that comes out, how that all works out. In the meanwhile, we have the committee assignments. Has everybody received their assignment? And many of you volunteered, and some of you were assigned in absentia. But is everybody okay with those? We tried to honor your request if you were not here.
Yeah, those were reflected in the minutes, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
They're
I was absent
Thank
from
you.
the minutes.
You were.
And the committee's in the minutes.
Oh, you got assigned.
I would hope
Yes,
to be
you were.
assigned.
Yeah, no,
but-
you were definitely assigned. I can tell you that for a fact. I don't have them in
I'll
front of
check
me right
with
this
Lynn
second. Please do. Yes,
afterwards.
absolutely. Please do. We can make sure that everybody does it. In fact, it might not be a bad idea to excerpt that from the minutes and send it around. Who's what?
Yes, per the request of Tom, I'm gonna do an Excel spreadsheet.
Perfect. Okay.
And include your phone numbers and email addresses so
Perfect.
that your subcommittee members can get.
Know how to get in touch, because when
And
we
it'll-
get these, I'm sorry.
It will list what committees everybody is on.
Yes. Yep.
I think I'm only on
We
one,
tried,
so I can
yeah, we
volunteer
tried to
for
limit,
others.
if you're on a big one, you might be on a big one and a small one, which doesn't take that much.
Yeah.
I mean, when we did a couple of them, Doug and I did a couple of them last year, we were on 3 of them, but they
Yeah.
were relatively small and easy to process through. So, if that's the case, is there any new business that we have to address tonight, other than that? If not, we have a record meeting, and I know, lucky us, right? Thank you for coming. But next week will be different. Tom?
Could I just ask, going back to the the library?
Yes, please
and
do.
and the trust.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, and I don't know because I've never seen the, how the deed is written,
Yeah.
but the problem we had with the Governor Stoughton property is the land was left for the use of the poor in Milton.
Right,
The land was left.
right.
Could not sell it and use the cash for the poor of Milton. That was not what the trust said.
Yeah.
This was
We
a place
had to
where they could
petition the
live.
Attorney General saying, we can't use the land, here is the next best alternative. And we had to go through a whole legal process, and the Attorney General approved it, sent it to the courts, I forget what court, probate, I think, court. And it was a process. Now, I don't know if this is similar to that.
I don't know.
I don't either.
Town council can give us opinion. I know they have read through this. John.
Oh, yeah, and what would make it different, I
Yeah,
guess?
John Flynn
It's a
was
kid
very
on
clear
blue.
about this, but we can ask him to come
ask him.
next week or at one of the meetings before we actually decide what we're going to do, to give us an opinion as to exactly what the limitation is. Jonathan, did you have a question? Or you, Chris?
I do, actually. I guess I wonder, I think it's worth knowing. I think we ought to
Yep.
know that. But I also wonder to what extent that matters for the warrant committee. The reason I say that is because if all they're asking out of the article is that the purpose of the trust go from use to sale, what happens at that point, I think, that's not our purview, right?
I guess theoretically, you're correct. You're correct. It's beyond our
Scope.
Purview.
scope. But on the other hand, we tend to approach things in this town and wind up with egg on our face so many times.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not
Yeah.
ask the question
If
first?
the
I
AG
think-
says it can't sell it because of terms of the will, then going through the whole process is,
Yeah, I guess I would be surprised. That's a fair point, Tom, and I get it. And it would surprise me if it gets to us and after the select board has seen it and town council has seen it, and that's the first time anybody's asked the question.
Yeah.
But
It would,
that's a fair point.
it would be surprising, but it might not be surprising.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can assume that. So I think it's worth asking the question. I think it's
I
absolutely worth asking
think
the
it
question.
did come up before the last time, and that's why, like, the Board of Selectmen has to buy the property, they can't transfer it to them and things like that. It has to be a sale, they have to get the cash at market value.
Right.
I believe.
Yes, I'd just like to hear from town
Yeah,
council.
exactly.
What differentiates
Yeah,
this
it's
from
just
Governor
another
Stoughton?
confirmation of it.
Just, I
wouldn't
mean,
hurt.
we are the fact-finding arm of the
Yes.
town meeting. So if somebody asked that question and we hadn't
Yes.
looked at it, I can imagine that people would say,
Yeah.
what did you do?
I don't disagree. I just wonder whether it ultimately has anything to do with how we vote.
Probably not.
It may not, but it's worth knowing the answer in case
At town meeting, somebody's bound to ask, so it's better to have the,
we want the
The
fact.
latest
It's not bad to have the
confirmation,
fact, and it's an
probably a
easy
long
thing for
line
him
of
to answer
confirmations.
to us too, because chances are, he probably already has the answer.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So are we also gonna reach back, or is someone gonna reach back to the school committee to see what's going on there?
They're coming next week. I can send Kevin Donahue.
I think we should, only because, I mean,
an
I
email.
was surprised at the last meeting about the need for space and how they were talking about moving kids and taking down rooms, so,
Yeah.
you know, I can't imagine
Yeah.
that they didn't or should have looked at it for an administrative purpose.
Well,
They
again,
want-
the administrative offices are a different kettle of fish. I mean, they could be relocated if, I'm sure they don't want to relocate them.
But,
I mean, I wouldn't, but,
I think the problem is most of their offices are in the high school,
Yeah.
and they
Agreed.
can't put
Kindergarten.
elementary
Right.
school
They don't wanna do that.
classes in the high school.
yeah.
So,
they used to have preschool, didn't they?
used to,
Not
now we've
anymore.
got all.
There was nothing wrong with it before.
Well,
Yeah, that's
You know.
true.
We'll have to ask the school
Mr.
committee.
Chairman,
Yes.
you had expressed concern in some of the notes that I was reading, just rereading right now, about the timeline. And I'm wondering if there's been any resolution in the timeline?
None yet. The
Okay.
timeline has not changed.
It has not
Has
changed?
not changed. So
Okay.
we will be under some pressure to get these done.
Would we be, oh, I'm sorry.
And we're sticking to the timeline that was sent out?
Yes.
Is that correct?
It's not been modified yet.
Okay.
In fact, we exchanged, Lynn exchanged a couple of times with the secretary to the select board to see if there had been any change. I saw the exchange and there was none. So
They're voting
we're,
on it 12-12.
yeah, exactly. Come out 12/12. Yes, it's going to be very tight. I will say that. And my observation is, okay, it's going to be tight. We're looking at budgets. We've got Christmas and New Year's and people's vacations and all this other stuff. So it's what we had determined, though, at the last meeting was that as we go through this process, this special town meeting and the town meeting, the annual town meeting in May, to more or less suborn a couple of people to each article to kind of do the writing and the legwork on it and to come up with questions as appropriate for them so that when we do get to the draft, we're not all scrambling like crazy people. And that was something that was universally accepted and appreciated. So when we get to that point, and I thank Chris for the very good idea. We give credit where it's due.
Thank you very much. I'm the man.
Yes,
Lord, help us.
I'm on TV too.
yes, yes.
And where do you work at?
Wait a minute, we can't turn this into an infomercial. We have, so that I hope will limit a little bit of the pressure on us, but it is going to be, it's going to be work.
Make sure that was
Yeah,
still in
just-
place.
and I know you all appreciate that, and you all were
100%.
heroically supportive the last time that we had to do this, and it really worked out very, very well. So, with that in mind, since we do have, a very short meeting. We might as well take advantage of it, and I say thank you very much. If there's no new business, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Next Monday night, 7 o'clock. Thank you all very much. We'll send-